Think about the quietest person in the room. What goes through your mind when you see them? Poor thing. Probably lonely. Bet they don't have many friends. Why are they just sitting there? But here's the thing. That quiet person might be seeing more than anyone else in the room. Who's uncomfortable? Where the conversation is starting to break down. The things nobody else has noticed yet. Just because someone isn't speaking doesn't mean nothing's happening. Quiet people aren't empty. Most of the time, they're completely full. But the world has been telling them something different for a long time. Why are you so quiet? Try to be more outgoing. You need to socialize more. Don't you think you spend too much time alone? You know what happens when you hear that your whole life? You start to believe you're fundamentally broken. That you're a flaw that needs to be fixed. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. Why introverts are quiet, what lives behind that silence, and how completely, for so long, we've had it all wrong. It's Friday night. A friend's place is packed. The music is loud. You can hear beer cans cracking open, laughter spilling out of every corner, someone yelling something from the kitchen. Everyone looks like they're having the time of their lives. And in the middle of all that, there's one person who seems to be thriving. Striking up conversations with strangers. Firing off jokes. Keeping the whole room alive. From the outside, they look like the perfect social butterfly. But here's what happened the moment they got home. They didn't even make it out of their coat before collapsing on the couch. Didn't turn on the lights. Didn't pick up their phone. A text came in and they didn't want to look at it. The phone rang and they just let it go to voicemail. They lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and drifted off just like that. Now, was that person an extrovert? Not necessarily. An introvert isn't someone who can't laugh or have fun around people. An introvert is someone who feels completely drained after they do. They spent all their energy at that party. Now they need to get it back. Extroverts actually gain energy from being around people. The longer the party goes, the more alive they feel. Being home alone is what drains them. Some people come alive in a crowd. Others need to leave the crowd before they can breathe again. Both are perfectly fine. But the world has spent a very long time only applauding one of those. And introverts who grew up inside that standard started to believe something was wrong with them. That's the real problem, not introversion itself, but the idea that introversion is a deficiency. You probably think you know when introverts struggle the most. Alone at home, right? A Friday night with no plans. Stuck in their room by themselves. You'd be completely wrong. The hardest moment for an introvert isn't being alone. It's being surrounded by people and feeling like none of it is reaching them. Picture a backyard cookout. People everywhere. Laughter, drinks, music, the smell of the grill. Everyone seems to be having a great time. But somewhere inside all of that, this feeling creeps in. Like there's a glass wall between you and everyone else. Like everyone is plugged into something and you just aren't. Like the conversation keeps flowing but none of the words are actually landing. Like you're smiling but you honestly don't know if it's real. That's the loneliness introverts are actually afraid of. Not being physically alone, but feeling alone in a room full of people. Being alone in your room is a choice. For an introvert, that's recovery. But feeling disconnected in the middle of a crowd? That's not something you chose. And that is so much more painful. So when someone tells an introvert, "Don't you get lonely by yourself?" You'd have so much more fun if you just came out. You can see how completely off the mark that is. Introverts aren't loneliest when they're alone. They're loneliest when they forced themselves to go out and couldn't connect with anyone there. Introverts don't count relationships. You could have thousands of followers on social media, but if none of them actually know you, it means nothing. But two people? Two people who you could talk to all night and never run out of things to say. People who make silence feel comfortable instead of awkward. People who know who you actually are. That's enough. So when someone asks why you don't have more friends, that's the wrong question. It's not that introverts don't have friends. It's that their definition of friendship is different. The people you text every day aren't necessarily your friends. The people who actually know you are. And finding those people takes time. And for introverts, the time before finding those people, the time spent alone, isn't empty. That's actually when they understand themselves the best. What they love, what they want, who makes them feel genuinely at ease. The people who know those things about themselves end up building better relationships in the long run. Picture this person, quiet in the group chat, rarely showing up in party photos, skipping birthday hangouts more often than not, slow to reach out first. On the surface, they can seem like someone who just doesn't want to be close to people. Cold, boring, indifferent, but when you text them on a really hard night, they're the first one to respond. The longest reply, the most genuine one, that's an introvert. They're not loud when things are ordinary, but they show up when it matters. You know why? Because introverts think before they speak. When something comes out of their mouth, it went through a long process before it got there. It's not a reflex, it's deliberate, and that's why when an introvert says something, it carries a different kind of weight. It's not that they have nothing to say, it's that their bar for saying something is higher. They're not interested in filling space with words. So if an introvert pays you a compliment, it's real. It's not small talk. It's not them reading the room. It came from somewhere. Don't let it slide. But the world calls this frustrating. Why don't you react more? Why are you so quiet? Why won't you just open up? And American culture, honestly, can be especially loud about this. Be more outgoing. You're so quiet, are you okay? Why don't you talk more? You should smile more. Just open up. You know how that lands for an introvert? It sounds like the way you naturally are is not enough. And when you hear that your whole life, from teachers, from parents, from friends, from coworkers, something shifts. Introverts learn to wear a mask. We need to talk about that mask. A lot of introverts spend years learning to act like extroverts, showing up to the things they're supposed to show up to, being warm and easy and talkative, making people feel comfortable. From the outside, they don't look like introverts at all. But when it's over, they come home and feel like the version of themselves that was just out there wasn't quite them. Not tired in a way they can sleep off. Depleted in a way that goes deeper. They don't want to talk. Don't want to look at a screen. Don't want any input from the world at all. Introverts have a way of describing this. I used up all my people today. I'm completely drained. Extroverts hear that and don't fully get it. You talked a lot. Why are you exhausted? But for introverts, this is a completely physical reality. Maintaining yourself in front of people takes energy. Managing your expressions, keeping the conversation alive, matching the energy of a room, responding in real time. For extroverts, that all just happens. For introverts, it's work. Conscious, continuous work. Of course it's exhausting, and the longer you wear that mask, the more you start losing track of who's underneath. Wait, what was I actually like before all this? What actually feels comfortable to me? When was the last time I felt genuinely happy? A lot of introverts hit their 30s or 40s and suddenly start asking those questions. After years of performing extroversion, they wake up one day and realize they are absolutely worn down. The mask isn't the problem. Sometimes life requires it. But the moment you start believing the mask is your real face, that's where things get dangerous. Here's what introverts are actually doing when they're alone. Not zoning out, not killing time. They're replaying the day, turning a conversation over in their head, wondering why that person said what they said, worrying about whether something they said might have landed wrong, thinking through how they'd say it better next time. What looks like spacing out from the outside is an enormous internal conversation happening in real time. This is exactly why introverts tend to have high empathy, a strong instinct for observation, and a natural ability to write. When you spend that much time looking closely at the world, you start noticing what everyone else walks past. The person who sat quietly in the meeting and then said exactly one thing, and it was the most important thing said all day. The person who was taking notes while everyone else was talking, and came back later with the clearest, most accurate summary. The one who sensed the shift in the room before anyone else felt it. None of that is accidental. The quiet person was absorbing. And when what they've absorbed finally comes out, it comes out refined. Words that were held for a long time before being said. Writing that came from thinking that came from watching. Insight built from patience. Most of the things that last in this world were made that way. The people who spent decades reading and writing alone in small rooms. The ones who preferred libraries to parties. The ones who found a long walk alone more restorative than a night out. The things they left behind are still here. And they've outlasted almost everything else. Let me speak directly now. If you're watching this and thinking, yeah, that's me, this is for you. feeling drained after spending time with people, coming home from a party and not wanting to do a single thing, finding it strangely hard to be the one to reach out first, preferring texts over phone calls, one-on-one over group conversations, sitting quietly at a gathering and then feeling a wave of relief the moment you walk back through your own front door. None of that is a problem. That's just how you work. But a lot of introverts hide this. You need an excuse to skip a hangout. Saying, "I just want to be alone," feels like something to apologize for. And if you sit quietly at a party, somebody asks if you're okay about 10 times. After a while, you start feeling like the way you naturally are is the wrong way to be. Why can't I be like them? Why is this so hard for me? Why do I feel so empty after being around people? That thought right there is the most dangerous one. You're not quiet because you have nothing to say. You're quiet because you don't say things carelessly. You're not alone because nobody wants to be around you. You're alone because that's where you come back to life. You're not skipping things because you dislike people. You might just know that your energy belongs somewhere else. You need to know the difference before you wait for anyone else to understand it. Telling yourself, "This is who I am, and there is nothing wrong with it." That's where it starts. There will be uncomfortable moments. That's just true. Times when you have to step up. When you have to speak. When you have to stay in the room longer than feels comfortable. The capacity to handle that tension can grow. That's growth. But that process doesn't require you to be ashamed of how you're wired. You can't perform extroversion forever. And you shouldn't have to. When the world says be more outgoing, put yourself out there, those aren't bad things to hear. But the moment those words turn your natural state into a weakness that needs correcting, that's where the problem is. Being quiet is not a weakness. Being alone is not a failure. Having less to say is not having less to offer. The ability to truly listen. The refusal to judge quickly. Taking the time to find the right words instead of the fast ones. Observing before moving. Waiting before deciding. These are extraordinary strengths. In a world where everyone is reacting louder and faster, the person who moves quietly and deeply is not behind. They're exactly what the moment needs. And for the people who have introverts in their lives, I want to say something to you too. If they don't text first, it doesn't mean they don't care about you. If they skip the party, it doesn't mean they're checked out. If they go quiet, it doesn't mean they're uncomfortable. If they don't show a lot, it doesn't mean they don't feel a lot. Asking if they're okay 10 times in a row is not always the move. Sometimes just being there is more than enough. The harder you push to get them to open up, the further they pull back. But give them space and they'll open on their own timeline. And when they do, that's when it gets real. When an introvert lets you in, it goes deep. The things they've been sitting with quietly, the observations, the thoughts, the things they noticed but never said out loud, all of that comes out. And you realize this person has been seeing everything all along. It just wasn't visible from the outside. If you have an introvert in your life, you're luckier than you might know. When they give you their time, they chose you. Introverts don't spend their energy on just anyone. If they're spending it on you, that means something. Don't take it for granted. The digital world, honestly, has been a bit of a gift for introverts. You can now stay connected without being drained by in-person interaction. Text-based communities, online spaces built around shared interests, environments where you can think through what you want to say before you say it, without the pressure of reacting in real time. The person on Reddit who reads quietly for days and then drops one comment that somehow becomes the top reply. The person in a Discord server who hangs back, watches, and then at exactly the right moment says exactly the right thing. The person who seems completely expressive online but barely says a word in person. Same reason every time. When you write, you get to think first. There's no pressure to respond instantly. You can actually say what you mean. And introverts say things better when they have that space. If you see an introvert who seems lively online and think, wait, maybe they're not actually introverted, you're misreading it. That's not a contradiction. That's just their preferred format for connection. For some people, typing is more natural than talking off the cuff. That's not a performance. That's just how they communicate best. Introverts aren't communicating less. They're just not doing it where you can see. The world needs the loud ones. The people who initiate, who create energy from nothing, who walk up to a stranger without a second thought. Those people keep things moving. But the world needs the quiet ones too. The ones who listen until the very end. Who think before they act. Who choose words carefully. Who watch and wait. Those people keep things honest. When everyone is talking, someone needs to be listening. When everyone is moving fast, someone needs to slow down and think. When everyone is charging forward, someone needs to ask why. That's the introvert. That's their role. That person in the corner of the coffee shop, reading alone. They're probably somewhere right now. Earbuds in, not saying much, quietly taking it all in. Are they lonely? I don't know, but you can't assume that just because they're alone. There is so much more happening behind their eyes than you'd ever guess. Being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. Being quiet and being empty are not the same thing. Having less to say and having less to think are not the same thing. Being most comfortable alone and not needing anyone are not the same thing. And maybe, if you watched this all the way to the end, you're one of those people sitting in the corner of that coffee shop. If you are, then just this. You're allowed to live the way you actually live. The world will keep telling you to change. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means the world hasn't caught up to you yet. Silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's the fullest thing in the room.
We live in a world that mistakes volume for value. The loudest voice in the room gets called a leader. The quietest one gets asked if something's wrong. But think about every idea that ever changed the way you see the world. Every book that cracked something open inside you. Every conversation that stayed with you for years. Chances are it didn't come from someone performing. It came from someone who had spent a long time alone with their thoughts, turning something over and over until it became true. The world didn't need them to be louder. It needed them to be exactly what they were. And maybe that's the most radical thing an introvert can do. In a world addicted to noise, not to speak up, not to push back, just to remain, quietly, completely, unapologetically themselves. So if you've been waiting for permission to stop performing, to stop shrinking yourself into a shape, the world finds more comfortable, consider this your sign. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are not broken. You are just built differently. And the world, whether it knows it or not, has always needed people like you. The ones who listen when everyone else is talking. The ones who think when everyone else is reacting. The ones who feel everything deeply and say it only when it matters. Don't change that. Don't fix that. Protect it. Because the world has always been changed. Not by the ones who spoke the loudest, but by the ones who thought the longest. And you've been thinking for a very long time.